Hey everyone, it's Tuesday and it's 3 o'clock. That means it's Tech Tuesday. And today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity with my special guest, Travis Abrams from UNS. Be right. Thanks for joining me with my special guest, Travis Abrams, whose picture is not on the camera at the moment. Let me see if I can fix that. We were having some technical difficulties here right before our broadcast. There you are. Okay. That part's working. And yeah, I can hear you too. That's good. So yeah, we were trying to figure out why we could not see Travis's presentation on the screen. So Travis, I'm gonna take a quick look and see if it's there. Not there. So let me try one other thing. And if not, we'll just have to talk through it. Sorry. Clicking all kinds. Let me just see if I can find that. Where we have the presentation. Yeah, I'm not seeing that. That's just got your video in there. So we're going to have to, I guess we're just have to talk through it, but there wasn't really that much on the slides. There's a lot of text. So you still have the presentation there you can refer to.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll do that. And then we're doing this again next week. So hopefully we'll get the bugs worked out. We actually did a test of this Friday and everything worked great. So it's just one of those Murphy's Law things.
Well, you know how tech is, Rick. As soon as you go live, that's when, everything happens.
Everything falls apart right then. Yeah. So, but anyway,
we'll figure it out for sure.
Yeah. And certainly most of what you're going to be providing, lots of information. And, there's really wasn't that much in the slides other than maybe prompts for you. And, there's some text and stuff on there that you can kind of read through as well. But anyway, so I appreciate everybody joining us. Thank you. Just a couple of things before we get started here. I just wanted to make you aware that if you want to chat with us, feel free to do that. See, somebody already said hello, fellow broadbanders. So you can chat with us, and I'll pull up that at various times if you have any questions, or I'll leave it up if we have a lot of conversation in there. So just feel free to chat amongst yourselves about cybersecurity NIST. If you have any questions, then I'll be able to read those to Travis, and we can get those answered at some point, probably towards the end, unless it's something pretty relevant at that point. Also, if you're not subscribed to our channel, just go ahead and click the subscribe button, click the little bell to be notified when we're live. Whenever I post a video or I'm doing a live video, that'll pop up. If you like the video, I'd appreciate it if you give us a like. You see our contact information right there. So, if you need to reach out to us, and, we can actually help in this area. So just a kind of a quick introduction. So Travis Abrams is with UNS, a security expert and one of our security partners here. So we can help you as we're talking through this. If you're going like, wow, this sounds just really onerous. How do I do this? We can answer questions for you. We can help with the services. We can provide managed cybersecurity as a service for you if, as you go through this is something that just seems really difficult. We'd be happy to help you with that. So, Travis, you want to give a quick rundown on your background in the security area before we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rick. I've been involved in cybersecurity since going back to 1999, when we didn't call it cybersecurity, right? It was information security. And I'm currently part owner and the director of our managed services and our assessments at UNS. So been involved in cybersecurity for many years, worked in a lot of different organizations, everything from your global manufacturing organizations to law firms, telecommunications. So broad experience, hopefully be able to provide some value to those joined today.
Mm-hmm. And this is really an important topic for a couple of different reasons. One, obviously, kind of the topic is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is something that's required for internet service providers that want to be providing broadband service over a BEAD-funded network. It's something that they need to comply with, or a cybersecurity plan that reflects that. And then the broadband offices, we may have some broadband offices that are watching this, and they need to make sure that their subgrantees attest to the fact that they've got a framework like that in place. So this is important. But I also wanted to bring up the fact that this is important regardless, depending on whoever's watching here. If it could be just a small business, it could be a broadband provider that's maybe not looking to get BEAD funds, but the cybersecurity is obviously important, and the NIST framework is something that can help them. So I think that's where you're going to kind of start us off, right?
Yeah, that's where we'll start off. So today we'll cover kind of three areas, right? So first is introduction to the NIST CSF, or Cybersecurity Framework. So cybersecurity framework is a lot of words, so we'll use CSF a lot to abbreviate that, because we're in IT and we all love acronyms.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about the requirements specifically for the BEAD program. And then just, again, some of the benefits and value of the NIST CSF. In later sessions, we'll go into a little more detail. We'll start deep diving into kind of the 5 pillars of NIST, what type of technical controls you need to have, the processes, things like that. And then we'll even talk about implementation and deployment. And those will be in later video sessions that we'll do.
Yeah, I think our plan today, I should say our plan at this point, is we think we can cover everything in 2 weeks. So this is our first session, and then next week I think we'll be able to finish off with kind of the more practical application stuff. So,
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so let's start with first, what is the NIST CSF, right? And most of you have heard of NIST. It's the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. They are an organization under the Department of Commerce. And if you Google them, their mission is to provide competitiveness and innovation to the American and manufacturing sectors, things like that. But they also provide a lot of standard scientific processes, weights, measurements, all kinds of stuff. And the cybersecurity framework is really a set of guidelines and best practices and standard developed by NIST to help organizations manage their cybersecurity processes, right? If you think about, all of you have businesses, and your business, you probably have budgeting processes, you have, frameworks and plans and how you will go about, doing sales, growing your business, all of that. And it's really the same thing for cybersecurity, right? How do you know where you're truly at in being cyber secure if you don't have a framework to measure yourself by? And that's one of the great things that the CSF allows you to do. It was created in response to cybersecurity threats faced by all kinds of organizations, right? Not just government, even though they are a government entity, and that was, of course, a big focus for them, but critical infrastructure and private industries. All of you have, heard of ransomware. I'm sure some of you may have been impacted in the past. There's just so many attacks out there that it's become overwhelming for security professionals to stay on top of it, and almost impossible for small businesses and regular organizations to really understand and know what they're supposed to be doing around cybersecurity. And so that's really the goal. CSF provides a common language and a structured approach, right? So instead of you always having to, try to figure out what you need or being reactive, a lot of organizations are very reactive when it comes to cybersecurity. They get hit with some kind of attack, or they hear about something, so they implement something to fix that. Well, we want you to be proactive, right? And also, not everything to do with cybersecurity has to do with the new technology. Many of us think of firewalls, endpoint security, and that's really all we think about when we think of cybersecurity, but there's so much more to it. There's processes, procedures, how will you respond to a cybersecurity incident? Because you will have one, right? There's no way to truly prevent all cybersecurity, but you want to have a way to respond and recover. And again, those are the types of approaches that the cybersecurity framework allows you to develop.
That's interesting because, I think that's true, that it's the kind of thing where you can expect it to happen. So a lot of what NIST is trying to do, and a lot of what you want to do if you're implementing these policies and procedures, as well as technology, is to mitigate that. So maybe you catch something sooner, right, before it can be a problem.
Absolutely. It's about risk reduction, right? And that's really so much of life is risk reduction, right? How do we reduce our risk to a manageable level? How we know that there's going to be bad guys out there. We know that our networks are under continuous attack. So when that something happens, we want to minimize the impact of it. We want to be able to recover from it quickly and move on and get back to normal business. And that's one of the great things about this. NIST has gained, the cybersecurity framework has gained wide acceptance and adoption, not only in the United States, but internationally. And what that means for you is that when you're implementing a recognized standard like this and you're using it as a guide for how you're going to implement cybersecurity in your company, it's well respected. So if you're having to deal with cybersecurity insurance, for example, you know that the premiums are going up. The requirements to even get this insurance is going up tremendously as well. The insurance companies no longer want to pay out claims, especially when organizations weren't following best practices. So by following a framework like cybersecurity framework, you can ensure that you're following best practices. You have a recognized model and plan of how you're implementing this. So when you take it to your customers, you take it to cybersecurity insurance providers, other partners that may request and want to know how you're managing your cybersecurity program, it's going to be well recognized and it's going to be accepted, right? The organizations are going to see that as a very positive, that you're using this as your framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and practically also, regardless of BEAD and regardless of the framework, it's really important for a broadband service provider because their business is the connection that they're providing. They're providing IP services to people. So if they have a ransomware attack or a DDoS attack or even something like that, that is going to impact their network, then that's a problem. And quite often there's these unfunded mandates, and people may be looking at this in the BEAD program and the Notice of Funding Opportunities and unfunded mandate, but it may even be funded in this case because I was reading through that. And it says eligible uses of funding in connection with last mile broadband deployment projects include network software upgrades, including but not limited to cybersecurity solutions. So It may be that this is something as they need to get their network in shape and maybe some of the technology and policies and things in place that this can be funded through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And NIST is the entity that will be administering the grants for the BEAD program. And specifically requirements for BEAD. And we'll be able to provide this PowerPoint out to everyone later. But there are some specific requirements, and we have the documentation straight from the BEAD program. Mm-hmm. But one of them, the first one, states that the subgrantee must have a cybersecurity risk management plan in place that is either A, operational, or B, ready to be operationalized as soon as you receive funding, essentially. Now, we would always recommend, not waiting to see if you're going to get funding, because as we mentioned, all of this is best practices. All of the items within NIST are areas you need to be focusing on. The great thing about this framework too is that it can be customized to you. Of course, there's a difference between a 10-person company and a 10,000-person company, but the framework can be applied in a way that allows every size organization to gain value from it. So we recommend, of course, that you perform the basics and start getting that in place ahead of requesting funding. Again, because it's really a best practice. And the great thing, a lot of things you may already be doing are going to fall underneath the program. So if you're a city government or another entity, maybe you're taking on a PCI, so you're doing credit card processing, or there's other standards you've had to apply with, those will map directly to the cybersecurity framework. So work that's already been done can be leveraged towards this, and then work that you do under this can be leveraged against other frameworks down the road. So while they say it has to be ready to be operationalized, that also means you've done the work and you are literally ready to turn it on as you receive the funding to expand that broadband access.
Yeah, and let me interject also that I did link to the cybersecurity framework, where you can download it in the description of this video for anybody that's watching. So,
Yep. The other requirement for BEAD is that the plan, follow the NIST framework for improving critical infrastructure. And that is a long sentence for basically saying that the standards and controls that you follow and implement must map to the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So that's why we're, again, positioning this one, because it's, again, best practices, but also specifically has the sets of controls that you'll need for the BEAD program. And then it needs to be reevaluated. Now, we recommend at least reviewing your plan every year, but there's also times when you may need to do it sooner. So if you are involved in a merger, maybe you acquire another company, that's a good time to look at your cybersecurity risk plan, because inevitably risks have changed, right? There's new technologies, there's new systems, things like that should be accounted for and reviewed. And then the plan actually has to be submitted to the entity prior to the allocation of funds. So you have to have basically a written plan that would be submitted before you're allocated the funds. So again, this is all an area that we can help you create the plan, have that plan ready to go, and then it has to be submitted. Also, they do have a right to audit. So they can come and ask you to prove that you're implementing the plan. They could ask for updates periodically. If you make substantial changes, then a new version must be submitted within 30 days. So they are placing specific requirements around the funding. But again, all best practices, right? It's essentially establish a plan, manage the plan, and then update it periodically and review it.
And then from there.
Yeah, the other area too that BEAD specifically calls out is a supply chain risk management plan. And when I think of this, I read this, and most of you probably think the same thing. You think, well, supply chain, that's manufacturing. That is, not something that we would be involved with, because that's what most people think of. But in this case, they're referring specifically to your cyber supply chain risk management. And this is really in response to recent attacks we've seen, with the largest being the SolarWinds breach. In this attack, attackers were able to gain access to the SolarWinds Orion product line and basically modify the update controls so that when your server at your location connected and downloaded updates from the vendor, those updates had been compromised. So now the bad guys essentially had access to every client that was running this product. And this resulted in a compromise of numerous government entities. Microsoft was also compromised. Some of the largest corporations around the world, and many small companies could have easily been targets as well for this. So when you think of supply chain risk management, it's really now even your cyber security. And so what this requirement generally is really about processes and documentation. So you need to understand the critical applications that are running your business, right? So what really manages and runs your business? How are those products updated by the vendor? So a lot of this will be about talking to the vendors, asking them for documentation on how they're securing and validating the updates, and then also even potentially implementing processes yourself. So for example, maybe updates aren't applied automatically to critical systems. Maybe they're applied in a test environment first, right? And then they're analyzed before going into production. So really it's your cybersecurity risk management plan and then your cyber supply chain risk management plan that needs to be implemented and ready to be operationalized for the BEAD program.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking with the supply chain, was that this was talking about making sure that you had enough materials coming in so that you could provide the service. But what you're saying really is that the internet service provider needs to be, as part of their plan, they need to be getting with their suppliers and vendors that could somehow compromise their network. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. If you think about, I mean, we're all a digital. Everything we do now is digital, right? And so you may have cloud vendors providing your billing software. You may have obviously network management applications that are running to provide the broadband access. All of this is using software, and that software has been provided by a third party. How are they managing that, right? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
did they develop that software in a secure practice? How's it being updated to ensure that malware or malicious code is not being injected into that software, and just understanding where you could be vulnerable. There is some technologies that can help with this, around like vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management. But some of this is going to really need to be procedural. How are you managing these apps? Do you know what applications are running on your network? How are they being managed? Are you running outdated sources of software that need to be updated? Things of that nature.
And what else have you got? I can't see what you're presenting, so I don't know what's next.
Yeah, and so really, let's just go over some of the benefits and value of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework.
Mm-hmm.
So first, really, it's a common language. And so when we talk about common language, if I start talking to you about controls and standards and all these technologies, it can be overwhelming. And that can be true of executives and other business people within your companies, clients, customers. So with NIST, we have developed, and they have a common language. So once everyone starts implementing this, you can really get everyone on the same page. So when we start talking about technical controls, everyone understands what that is. When you talk about standards and things of that nature, everyone's going to understand it, because again, this is a very common, aligned best practice framework. The same with flexibility. This is not something you're going to purchase and implement, or implement in a week, right? This is a journey. And so for some organizations, it can take years. For large companies, for others, it can take months. And so this is something that's very flexible. It can be applied in different ways to the different size organizations, right? And you're even able to scope it a little bit to very specific areas of your network. And then you can use it as that guideline for long-term improvement. And really, again, it's a journey. So if it takes you several months or even years to get there, that's okay. But you have a framework now that you're following, and then you can share that with others, and they'll all understand exactly what you're doing because of the common language. The same with alignment of best practices. Everything that's going to be recommended inside of the cybersecurity framework is really a cybersecurity best practice. And that goes down to the different technologies that will be recommended, your next gen antivirus, your vulnerability scanning, pen testing on an annual basis, things of that nature, but also procedural best practices. So making sure that you have a right process for onboarding new hires, for terminating people and when they leave, or when they leave the company, that you have executive buy-in, right? Cybersecurity has to be, a whole company has to be bought in, right? So again, this all aligns to best practices.
Yeah, that's.
NIST also, go ahead, Rick.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's very important, because a lot of times what will happen is people will have these things these plans, and they put them in place, but then they get forgotten. So I think a lot of it's probably documenting it and then keeping track of it and making sure that everybody's following the rules. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it's all about collaboration and communication, right? So a lot of the processes or policy documents that need to be created are created the one time, right? And then, of course, you want to review it, like we mentioned earlier, just to make sure that it is still relevant to your organization if there's changes. But the biggest lift, if you will, is in the beginning, creating the initial procedures, policy documents, making sure you have the right technologies in place. But once that's ready and done, I mean, it's relatively easy to manage, because again, at that point, it's just ongoing maintenance of the program. Yeah. And regulatory compliance, again, is a big one. With, again, cybersecurity insurance becoming harder to get, or with the premiums really going up a lot, especially if you do not implement certain controls. And we'll talk more in depth on that. But we've had companies that the cost of implementing the technologies that they needed was less than what their premium was going to go up. So it made sense, right? And you can absolutely save money on the insurance premiums, and also ensure that you're going to get covered when something happens. I mean, a ransomware attack, for example, against the small business can be catastrophic. It can put companies out of business. City governments can end up having to pay thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars if they're not ready. And the insurance companies simply obviously don't want to pay that out anymore, right? So having these controls in place, having a documented plan of how you're managing cybersecurity will, one, keep your premiums low. Two, is going to reduce the risk that it would happen in the first place. But if it does, you're going to be much more in compliance with your insurance provider to ensure that they're going to pay out the claims that you're entitled to with that. And the last area is continuous improvement. As all of you know, if you're involved in technology, it is a continuous learning process. There's always something new to learn, upgrades. You have to continually update your network to provide fast broadband. Cybersecurity is no different. But by having the framework, you have a plan in how you need to improve and how you can review that. So again, it can be structured. You're not going to be guessing or wondering, what do I need to implement now? Or, how should I go about, evaluating our risk? And, when budget times come, for example, you can have a clear framework where you could show someone, look, here's the model we're following. We've been doing this for, 2 years, and this is where we're at in our technology. We need to improve. This is what we're budgeting for. And it becomes much easier to get the justification, and again, to continually improve your cybersecurity. Yeah, and that's, really the goal for the NIST CSF.
Okay. And I can't recall. I think this is basically what we kind of felt would be a good primer on this. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So, and then, let me remind everybody that, there's a link to where you can download the framework in the description of this video. So you can look at that. It looks, when you look at it, it's kind of scary. So it helps to have somebody who knows about it, who can help you with that. So again, as you're looking that over, if you realize we need help with this, just reach out to us. We can help. Us and our partner, Travis and UNS, can help with that process. So that's the first part of everything. And then do you want to give a quick preview of what we're going to be talking about next week, just kind of the other topics?
Yeah, absolutely. So next week, we're going to dive a little deeper into some of the more technical aspects and get a little deeper into what NIST has. So for example, there are 5 main components of the cybersecurity framework. The first being identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So you can even see from the name of those core components, it's really taking you through that entire process, if you will, around cybersecurity. How do you identify your risk? How do we protect against normal attacks? And how do we safeguard our critical services? How do we detect if something is happening? How do we respond to that detection? And then how do we recover from that? So we'll go a little bit deeper into those and actually talk a little bit about some of the tools and the technologies and the services even for example, that we can offer with Zcorum to help organizations meet these requirements.
Yeah. So as you hear those core components, you've got the framework, which is kind of the telling you everything that you need to have in place, and a lot of that has to do with policies and practices and procedures and making sure you've got procedures in place for passwords and those kinds of things. But then there's some technology involved as well. So I guess that you've got to be able to do that as well. So there's components of making sure you've got the plans and processes in place, but also you've got the technology in place to be able to detect these things and take action. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. Cybersecurity is not just about a firewall or endpoint security. It's definitely about processes, procedure, people. But without the firewall and endpoint security, you're not secure either, right?
Yeah.
So it is really all about people, processes, and technology.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. Surprisingly, I thought we'd have some folks that would have questions specifically about maybe the framework, but maybe that will come up next week as we get into more details. So again, next week, if you will join us, same time, same bat channel, Tuesday at 3:00 Eastern time. I'll be here with Travis. Hopefully we'll get the little bug worked out where we can show slides as Travis talks. So you don't need to just look at us. You can actually look at what he's looking at there on the screen. But we will be back then. So I thank you today. I thank you for joining us. Again, you see Zcorum's contact information down there. So if you have any questions, a lot of times people will see this video after we're live. So if you have any questions, one of two things you can do. If you want to just pop a comment on YouTube, I will see that. And if it's something I can't answer, I'll get with Travis and make sure I get an answer and we'll reply on YouTube. Or you can see our email address right there, info@zcorum.com. That will come to me. I will see that. I'll be happy to, again, reply to that with an answer for you. Also, you can check out our website. Go and look for cybersecurity on there if you want to see what it is that we have to offer. You can check that out at zcorum.com. So, Travis, I appreciate your time today. It's been very helpful, and I look forward to next week when we dig in even deeper.
Yep. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And Travis and I will see you next week. I will see you probably tomorrow with Broadband Deployment News at some time during the day. So if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when I'm live. And again, if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you give us a like on it. So thanks a lot, everybody. And I will see you later, probably some point tomorrow, but I will see you next week, Travis, for Tech Tuesday. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.